and welcome to the Deep NBA podcast. My name is Sean, and joining me as always is the one and only Dante Boff. Mr. Boffman, man, how are we?
I'm good, Sean. I'm so stoked to be returning to the bad old days of Zoom podcasts.
Yeah. Just, I was sitting there while Zoom was glitching for a couple of seconds, just watching, the wheel turn around and it said not responding. Then it went grayscale. I was just like, man, it has been a minute, but yeah, back in the virtual world. Do you reckon these were better podcasts over the internet, or what do you reckon?
Well, I think first of all, no, because you can't quite replicate the magic of being in the room. There's something about the aura that you have that I really feed off of. So I feel like physical proximity is a great quality to have in a podcast, so we can make eye contact with our eyes rather than mediated through the middleman of a computer screen. But also I feel like the Wi-Fi in Perth's not great.
That's right. Oh,
Wi-Fi
the actual good old days.
Or more specifically, my bedroom in Perth was not fantastic. So one thing I'll say about my current address, I was about to say the address and dox myself, but I'm not going to do that. One thing that's great about my current address is that the Wi-Fi is really good and my bedroom is right next to the router. So I'm just fucking operating on 4 bars here.
Yeah, beauty. One thing I didn't miss about you being in Perth is that obviously I would finish talking and then there'll be a couple of seconds delay where I'll be like, "Now, what do you think of that, Dante?" And then you would wait a little bit and then go, yeah, Sean, I completely agree. And then I would have to go in, / niece Carly would have to go in, chop. And then as soon as you came back, the first podcast we did in person, we sat down next to each other, we recorded it. I chucked the USB right into the computer once we were done. I literally top and tailed it and uploaded it. I was like, this is incredible. I don't have to do anything. Seamless. And it also comes a little bit with, having the experience of doing nearly 160 episodes of a podcast. That always helps.
A bit of a flex there from niece Kylie. But credit where credit is due. So we're recording this virtually because I have COVID.
Yeah, we didn't say that.
People have probably figured out from my fucking voice by now that something is not right, that I'm even more congested than I usually am. So yeah, I'm pretty much locked in my room. And the cruel thing about, I've got really lovely bay windows in my room, which is wonderful. But being locked inside, it's quite cruel because I just want to go outside, but I've got a fantastic view of what I cannot have. So I'm struggling with that a little bit through the first 3 days of my 1 week.
Yeah. So what have you been doing for the past 3 days?
Bit of this, bit of that.
Of course. All right. Offseason grades.
Prepping, hitting the fucking pavement. No, I've been reading a lot. I've got a nice little reading set up, so smashing through some words on that. Playing a little bit of Football Manager. I did send into the group chat the other day that it's a bad time to be a League One team in my 2027-28 Football Manager team. And that has borne out to be completely true because managing Middlesbrough, I'm undefeated since then, and I'm on top of the ladder by 9 points with a game in hand about halfway through the season. So that's neither here nor there, but I have been investing some time into that. Also, both of my first team left backs want to leave in the same transfer window. And yeah, so, that's kind of been playing on my mind a little bit. And I've also started watching the 4th season of Star Trek Discovery. So far, it's great. Wonderful.
Yeah. All right, good to hear.
You look so unimpressed.
I really hoped you were going to say Better Call Saul, but you didn't.
Better Call Saul, what's that?
Yeah, it's a good show. All right, yeah. Let's move on to off-season grades. If you've clicked on this episode, then you've seen the title and you know that we are going to, for the 3rd time in the Deep NBA podcast history, we will be doing off-season grades. I think once or twice we did a regrade, but nevertheless, we still give them a grade. So we're going to run through every single team. Not every single team's obviously done with their off-season. We have some teams like the Brooklyn Nets, who are completely not finished with their off-season. And we're going to run through. We're going to give them a grade, just a number grade. a letter grade. Literally just missed that one. And in terms of our grading, we're look at it from the point of view that a C is just simply a pass grade. So if you get a C, it doesn't mean you're bad, doesn't mean you're good. It just means that is, your 50th percentile outcome. And then anything above, obviously, is positive. Anything below is negative. And I think, we fine-tuned this a little bit. I think we're both on the same page here where it goes, I'm looking at the off-season as, a time to build towards a championship, whether that be trading for Malcolm Brogdon so you can make another push, or whether that be drafting Jaden Ivey because you want to try and put together a championship team. I'm looking at it through the lens of getting closer to a championship. I think you're the same, Dante. Is that right? Do you want to butt in?
No, I feel like the first time we did this way back in 2019, we both brought wildly different criteria to the exercise, and only realized that approximately 3 teams in. So I feel like those days are past and we're broadly on the same team. Although we do obviously value different things in an off season or in a team's direction. So I'm happy to say that there's a healthy amount of discrepancy, which is good. And just to mention, this episode will be for the Wrighton Conference, and we'll be hitting the Lefton Conference at a later date.
At a later date, he says, in case something explosive happens next week where we can't do it, like a Kevin Durant 14 trade to your Phoenix Suns. But we'll save that for when it actually happens. We've obviously got 2 episodes talking about a potential KD trade. No need to make it 3. But just before we get into the top of the Eastern Conference with the Atlanta Hawks, what's something that you took away after? Obviously, we've gotten every move written down here, and we've written our own sort of opinions, but what's something that you've taken away here about just the overall off season for the Eastern Conference?
Well, I think this is true of both the East and the West, that for the contenders, it's been an off season of moves around the margins. No one has yet, obviously excluding the KD trade, which will change this for a few teams, but no one has really made big splash moves. No contender has really added anyone that costs significant assets. And a lot of the contenders have just kind of said, like, we're going to roll in with the same team and add a veteran on the taxpayer mid-level. And it's going to come down to, does your veteran on the taxpayer mid-level pop, or does their veteran on the taxpayer mid-level pop? And like, if the Boston Celtics, don't get anything out of Gallo, but the Clippers get heaps out of John Wall, then that's going to kind of tilt the performance in season for either team. So I think it's going to be like it has been an off season of the minutia rather than the kind of like broad strokes, grand scale franchise machinations.
Yeah, I think that the West has been so much better than the East. Just looking at all these moves, obviously we've got another document for the next time we record, but it's just the West, as we know, has been historically much better since Michael Jordan retired than the Eastern Conference. And I think like every single offseason and every single NBA draft, I always think like, okay, maybe let's look at who the top 5 picks are and which conference they're from. Like, where's the top talent going, or where are the big free agents landing? They're still just going in the West. So I think, again, overall, looking at this, I'm like, I think the West might have won another offseason and another draft period.
Yeah, potentially. But that being said, I'm pretty bullish on who I view as the top 3 teams in the East. So I still think that the teams that I'm looking at the top of the East are, broadly comparable with the teams that
West.
that are expected to be at the top of the West. So it's not often that you can say that. And I do think that, like, more broadly, currently there's greater like 1 through 8 parity between the conferences than has been the case in the past, because at least 1 through 6 in the East are like serious basketball teams, at least. And in the past, that hasn't really been true. And once you get to 6 or 7, it's like these teams would be the 11 seed in the West. So I think that maybe slowly the pendulum is swinging.
Yeah.
But that's enough digression. Should we get
Yeah,
into
let's get right
the
into it.
the
We'll start
Atlanta
off
Hawks?
with the Atlanta Hawks, who their major addition was DeJounte Murray, obviously in that trade with the San Antonio Spurs. Free agency, nothing quite notable, and in the draft, they drafted AJ Griffin, 16th overall. So, Dante, what grade are you giving the Atlanta Hawks?
I'm giving the Atlanta Hawks a B. And the reason why I'm giving them a B and not something greater for not giving up, for not sacrificing in the Murray trade, they didn't really sacrifice much of their current team. They largely sacrificed future draft picks.
Mm-hmm.
And Murray was an all-star, and he just averaged 18, 9, and 8, and he's been an all-defensive guard. So pretty decent pickup. The only reason why I'm giving them a B for this is because they've essentially locked themselves in to their two guards on big contracts. And they've, in the process, semi-depleted their wing depth. Now, wing depth is really important, we know, but also having big wings who can actually do things with the ball in their hands is really important. The majority of the kind of like contenders, if we were to run through, have a big wing who is at an all-star or all-NBA level who can make things happen as a primary creator. And not only do they not have that player, but by going all in on Murray, they've kind of hamstrung themselves in their ability to get a player like that. So I view it as a successful trade that will make them better in the short and medium term. But I worry that there's an opportunity cost here that might ultimately hamstring their true championship ceiling.
So I've also given him a B. And obviously we spoke about the DeJounte trade when it happened a couple of episodes ago. So I love the idea of Trey being off the ball and bringing in like two, while he might be a lesser all-star, bringing in two all-star guards in your backcourt. And obviously he's got the much better defensive reputation than Trey. But I'm not too worried about getting a big wing because when was the last time we saw a big wing like actually change teams? Like, definitely not in this offseason. They're just impossible to get. And if you're not going to get one for this Atlanta haul with all of Atlanta's picks, then like Minnesota just outbids them as well. If Minnesota also wanted a big wing. So in terms of like just getting DeJounte, getting the talent, getting an all-star backcourt, I love that. But the reason I haven't given them an A is just because like they said, and they publicly said that they want to trade John Collins. They've pretty much publicly said that for a very long time now. And they just couldn't find a trade partner. And I don't know whether that was because the only way to get off John Collins right now is to attach at least something to get off him. And maybe they just didn't want to do that at all. They wanted at least, average value or just, an absolute naught in return, just a net neutral. And they couldn't find it. And I think, whether he should be worth a pick or whether he should be worth just a better contract coming back, like, that's up in the air. But we know that every year there are stupid teams out there that make stupid moves, and they didn't do their job well in finding a stupid team to take on this contract. Also, something that we sort of glossed over just a week before free agency started was the Minnesota Timberwolves, like, publicly went out and said, hey, we really want to try and get Clint Capella. And it was like, oh, okay, that's going to be weird. How's he going to play like next to Karl Anthony Towns? And then it was like, ignoring the Minnesota factor, that's actually pretty good for Atlanta because they could just get, let's say, a Malik Beasley type and just say, just put another shooter around Trey or whatever it may be. And we didn't know about DeJounte at the time. Obviously, they went and got Rudy Gobert, and that sort of leaves the Hawks sitting there with just like, no other options as well, just to shed some of the big dudes that can't shoot and need to be elsewhere. So I think we got to the same place, but in different avenues. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think I weighted the lack of a move for Capella and Collins less than you, because I think Capella, there's a move for Capella because there will be teams that need his exact kind of play style. Like off the top of my head, Charlotte perpetually in need of a center, but also a team like the Mavericks, if they're kind of like big by committee approach doesn't work this season. Capella is the sort of guy who just plays really well with a ball dominant guard, and he knows how to run, be the role man in a pick and roll better than anyone in the league. So there's value for that. But yeah, I think ultimately we've come to a similar place. Just I kind of think that this is going to be an issue for Atlanta, with both a lack of wing depth and a lack of wing quality, because the teams that win championships just don't have two ball dominant guards and shooters. Like that's not really how it hasn't really worked at a high level over the last 10 years or so.
I will push back a little bit on your wing size thing. Now, obviously, they're going to get scoring elsewhere. But I think one of the more important things is that they have someone who can guard the big wins in DeAndre Hunter. Not the same thing, but it's not like they're completely desolate in that position.
No, they're not. But I know that maybe there's a tendency to maybe look at it and say, well, the ball's going to be in DeJounte and Trey's hands more, so you don't actually need a wing creator as much. But just because of those players' size and where they like the ball and where they can get the ball, they are necessarily easier to defend than a larger player with playmaking jobs. And when you get to the playoffs, like that's the shit that gets exposed.
Yeah.
It's easier to defend DeJounte Murray than it is to defend someone who's 6'8", 230. That's just the reality of the situation. He has to do more to have the same impact. So we'll see. I mean, I think overall they made their team better. And it isn't hard to be better than what they were last year, because they were an abject disappointment despite Trey saying that.
No, they were really they were sick of the regular season. They had obviously been there before, aka once, and just couldn't be bothered putting it together again. It must be hard.
These fucking entitled millennials, Sean. I tell ya.
TikTok generation. Let's move on to the Boston Celtics, who had a killer offseason. I'll give away my grade there a little bit. They picked up Danilo Gallinari for the taxpayer mid-level, and they traded for Malcolm Brogdon, among other things. What did they give up for him? A 2023 Boston pick and a fucking bag of chips. Like, this is absolutely nothing that they had to do to get a dude who you and I have been pining for him and making fun of a championship contender in the Milwaukee Bucks for not keeping the ideal second creator at the guard position in Malcolm Brogdon. And he's, in my opinion, gone to a better situation than he would have if he had actually stayed in Milwaukee. So I've given them an A+ for this, because what Boston had at their disposal was a taxpayer MLA. And as I said before, absolutely nothing. And they turned around, fixed their point guard, fixed their playmaking situation, added defense to the best defense on the planet, taken the ball out of the hands of their big wings throughout the regular season, added a beautiful regular season player in Danilo Gallinari. And I don't think you can get any better here. What have you given them?
I've given them an A, largely for the same reasons. Like, bag of chips is, man, the chip wrapper is what they had to give up to get Brogdon.
List the players, and then tell me the last time you watched them play basketball.
So we've got Daniel Tice recently. We got Nick Stauskas, Source Casero himself. We got Neesmith, who, okay. Juwan Morgan, I don't even know who that is. And Malik Fitz. That's it.
The only reason I know Malik Fitz's name is because Lucas from JVG NBA Trivia Show loves mentioning his name and pointing him out whenever we're watching a game together.
Okay, well, that's not a lot to give up for a guy who is, like you said, the ideal secondary creator. He's someone who's a really good three-point shooter, knows how to run a pick and roll, really good defender. Also, like, not for nothing, he's older than the rest of the guys on the team. He's close. He's pushing 30. And has he been the VP of the Players Association in the past, or involved in the leadership of the Players Association in the past? He was also on the ground during the George Floyd Black Lives Matter protests a few years ago. He's a grown up. He's someone with a strong social conscience. He's a leader. Kind of like an Al Horford minus the anti-vax stuff. So on a team whose best players are 23 and 24, like, I think that is actually really valuable. The only reason I've given them an A and not an A+ is because I don't actually love the Gallo signing, because it's pretty obvious he's not a postseason player.
Yeah,
he's,
I'll cop that.
A great regular season player, but a lot of the other taxpayer mid-level signings this year and in the past are players who you could reasonably expect to make any kind of impact deep into the postseason, which is the ambition for this team. So that they've signed a guy who will average 9-10 points a game for them in the regular season and hit some threes, but they've not really done anything to improve their playoff rotation outside of that. But
Yeah,
I mean, like the Brogdon trade is so otherworldly good from an assets, culture, and an on-court perspective that it's only knocked them down, in my opinion, to an A.
The depth, the deep two. God, that's a mouthful. Anyways, I'm Marco, co-host of the Hey, Daniel Gafford, what's the name of our podcast?
The JVG NBA Tribute Show.
Wow, I can't believe it's that easy. Thanks, Gaff. You probably know us as two members of the four-man weave plus Marco, but we know you as our next listener.
Well said, Lucas. I gotta ask, how do we differ from the pack of basketball podcasts?
It's a great question, Marco. You see, on our basketball podcast, we have two male co-hosts.
Wow, truly groundbreaking. After this episode, stay on your favorite podcasting app and give us a spin.
Hello, and the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets are the next team, and obviously there's going to be some asterisks, whatever the term is, all over this one. What's the term?
We're just saying asterisks, wouldn't we? It'd just be a singular.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's two, but obviously Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant have, well, one of them's requested a trade, one of them hasn't 3 times, but, another podcast, I've given them inconclusive, you've given them ungraded. Why didn't you go with inconclusive here? But jokes aside, if everything was whole for the Brooklyn Nets, obviously bringing in TJ Warren, Edwin Sumner, trading for Royce O'Neal, which was a great deal, re-signing Nick Claxton 2 for 20, Patty Mills opting out, then just getting more money later on as well, and re-signing Kessler Edwards. I would seriously think about giving them an A+ from where they were as such a capped out team heading into this offseason. That's actually quite a coup for a contending team. Just a little bit of a shame that they're probably going to be without the two pieces that make them contenders.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to give a well-rounded take on this, but here I go. I love the TJ Warren edition. The last time we saw this guy play basketball properly was in the bubble, and he scored 1 million points per game in the bubble. So cool. Let's see what he has. I don't really like the Royce O'Neal trade. I think Royce O'Neal's kind of washed as a
28-year-old.
No, well, seriously though, like he's part of the reason why the Jazz was so bad on the perimeter last year. Like he has been their de facto like number one perimeter guy, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's been a good number one perimeter guy for the last few years, especially kind of considering that on D he plays a similar role to Bruce Brown. And they're similar size. O'Neal's a bit bigger, but he's not big by any stretch of the imagination. He's like firmly wing-sized. Would I rather have Bruce Brown on the taxpayer mid-level or Royce O'Neal and give up a first-round pick? I'd definitely rather have Bruce Brown. Like for the role that O'Neal is going to be asked to play, I would rather have Bruce Brown. Claxton and Mills re-signing, love it. Good pieces of business. But yeah, I'm not enamored of giving up that pick for Royce O'Neal. And I also think, depending on what you get back in a trade, obviously they are signaling that they want to continue to compete and contend. That might not be possible. And Royce O'Neal, trading a first-round pick for Royce O'Neal is a move that only really makes sense for a team that's going to be in playoff top 6 contention, which if they're not, then it just seems like a squandered asset to me.
Obviously, they didn't know that KD was going to request a trade, though, at the time. There's no way you make that. But as we said, there's really not much we can say there. So let's move on to the Charlotte Hornets, who via free agency and trades have added no one. They have notable free agents in Miles Bridges and Montrezl Harrell, and they drafted the best draft pick here is that they drafted Mark Williams with the 15th pick, and they re-signed one of the Martin twins, Cody Martin, to a 4 for $32 million deal. I believe the final year of that is fully non-guaranteed. So I've given them an inconclusive as well, just because we don't know what this team is going to look like next season. We don't know whether Miles Bridges is going to be allowed to play basketball next year. Same for Montrezl Harrell. And as soon as you take those two guys away, which could very well happen, that's just 31 points per game that are just up in the air, where it's like, hold on a minute, that's nearly a third of your basketball production. So obviously you're going to have a bad offseason if you lose those guys, but I'm not going to dock the front office for that, for those decisions if that happens. So I've gone inconclusive, but what have you done here for the Charlotte Hornets?
Well, I've gone C because I don't love what they've done outside of the Bridges situation, but we should talk about that at least a little bit, which was a few days before free agency started. He was charged with felony domestic violence or domestic assault, and the images that his partner uploaded to Instagram are truly harrowing. And if you look at her face, you are kind of left in no doubt that he has actually done this, that he's domestically abused his wife. And I would be extremely surprised, even not talking about, like, is he going to prison? Is he, what the legal ramifications will be, because it's a serious charge. It's not like, it's a felony charge, which I think carries prison time. From an NBA standpoint, like, if he's not in prison, he needs to be suspended for a huge amount of time. Like, I mean, would a season be too much of a suspension for something like this?
That's what I've heard floated out in other podcasts where people, I think there was a precedent at some point in the past where a player missed a year for a similar thing.
If he's found guilty of that, and that's the precedent, like, well, he shouldn't be playing for a very long time. And that, on a basketball sense, obviously, he was clearly their second best player last year, so they're going to miss that. But also in terms of a financial sense, he was going to be a restricted free agent who was, being talked about as a $100 million player. That obviously is not going to happen. So this just feels like it's headed towards him taking his qualifying offer and playing out or not playing out this season on the qualifying offer, and then seeing what happens after. So there's no real risk of Charlotte dropping the bag on him at this point, I don't think, unless they're extremely, extremely cynical and they decide to use it as a negotiating tactic and say, we'll give you a 4-year deal, but we're going to give you a 4-year, $60 million deal instead, which I think would just be a pretty disappointing piece of business to be using a domestic violence charge as essentially a negotiating tactic. But I digress. Bringing back Cody Martin, sure, love it. He's probably worth $8 million a year. They were part of the three-way trade of nightmares with New York and Detroit, where it took all of us about an hour to figure out what was going on. It took Adam Silver about 3 hours to figure out what was going on, because he was still announcing shit that had happened yesterday at the draft podium. Essentially, they chose Mark Williams and a whole bunch of second-round picks over Jalen Duren, who I'm pretty bullish on him being quite good, and they had him in their laps and actually drafted him at 13 before trading him down. So I don't love that move, but really they've done nothing here of any real substance, which is kind of disappointing, because they're another of these teams, and we'll talk about a few of them later, who are like locked into a play-in ceiling and are also locked into their current salary cap, because like Gordon Hayward has very little trade value and quite a large cap hit. So they kind of can't really do anything, and they didn't do anything, and they're just going to be the same team that they were last season, most likely.
And on the Charlotte Hornets, you can go to the deep2.com to hear my thoughts about what the Charlotte Hornets need to do this offseason. They fired their coach, which I thought, maybe you don't have to do that in James Borrego. But then they didn't fire their GM. Michael Jordan gave Mark, what's his name? Something Kupchak.
Mitch
Kupchak gave him a contract extension, which is very much not deserved. And he's probably going to keep his job for another couple of years because these are, situations outside of his control for why his team's going to be bad at basketball.
Just in terms of assessing the job that the front office has done here, though, over say the last 5 years, if LaMelo Ball doesn't slip to 3, this team might be the worst team in the entire fucking league.
Yeah.
Seriously.
No, you're going to be getting Terry Rozier, James Wiseman pick and rolls for 3 years in a row now.
The only reason why this team has anything even remotely resembling a bright future or a foundation is simply because 2 teams decided to pass on arguably the best player in the draft. So if it wasn't for a stroke of luck, the situation would be looking a hell of a lot worse. So Mitch Kupchak should be cutting a check to Gerson Rosas and what's your guy's name?
Joey Lightyears.
Yeah, and Joey Lightyears
for letting him fall.
For not taking LaMelo.
It was, as I said, Joey Lightyears. Jordan Poole doesn't become Jordan Poole if LaMelo Ball's there. So, of course, that was the play from day one. Dante's nodding for those who can't see. Move on to the Chicago Bulls, who this offseason they have signed Andre Drummond and Goran Dragic, and they drafted Dalen Terry with the 18th overall pick, and they re-signed Derrick Jones Jr. to 2 for $6. Thank goodness we didn't have that picnic bet as we did 2 years ago, where I said he's going to get $10 million a year in free agency, and then ended up signing for 9. But yeah, Derrick Jones, how his star has fallen, and some like yourself might argue his star was never up there in the first place. And they lost Troy Brown Jr. to the Lakers. This is on the next page, so I missed it. They re-signed Zach LaVine, 5 years for respect. That joke was never funny. For 5 years, $215 million. So, Dante, what have you given the Chicago Bulls here for their offseason?
I've given them a B because getting Drummond and Jones on what has to be vet minimums for them. That's a pretty good fucking paying absolutely nothing to get guys who can be your 8th and 9th guys. In terms of resource distribution, Drummond filled in okay for Embiid last season when he went down. And
Drummond's a good backup. One of the better
Drummond
ones.
Drummond is a good backup. You're paying $3 million for him, and Derrick Jones is, he is what he is, and he gives you a different look offensively. He gives you a different skill set, especially when you're playing with Vooch. If you wanted to go small with Derrick Jones for 4 minutes in the third quarter and run a whole bunch of pick and rolls and get him 2 dunks and run in transition, paying him $3 million for the luxury of having the option is a pretty good piece of business. So obviously LaVine was going to get the max after putting up, the last 2 seasons, the best 2 seasons of his career, and kind of cementing himself as a legit, top 25-ish player. They made the easy decision there. That's really all they did. I think they're just going to bank on rolling into this season, capturing the good vibes and form that they did last season, and say to LaVine and Lonzo, actually be healthy this year, and maybe we can actually be a playoff team.
Yep. I've also given them a B, more in terms of a very good job at treading water. I was very, very critical of them for the DeMar DeRozan signing last offseason. Trade.
How did that work out for you?
It actually worked out exactly how I thought it would. I said
this first year is going to... You didn't think DeMar DeRozan was making second team All-NBA. No, you didn't. I was there.
I said that his first year in this contract is going to be his best, and I still don't reckon they're going to win a title. And then from there, it's just downhill. Also, they don't own their 2025 first-round pick. So, yes, it might have hit the top 0.0001 percentile of what I had predicted. Still hit it, and I'm here on my high horse. But
the Sean Carroll playbook here is cast a very vague, wide net and then claim credit when anything similar happens.
I don't want to talk about this to the guy who said that the Warriors should have traded their dudes and they will never win a title, and then they won a title, and he still talks about it.
That's not you're getting your feelings and grossly misrepresenting.
Just remember who edits this. I've given them a B. Treaded water as best they could. It's pretty fine. I'm just happy with it. It's going to be a better team. They've just replacing Kobe White and Tony Bradley with Goran Dragic and Andre Drummond obviously makes them older, takes away a little bit of the ceiling prospects there. Not that there was such a high ceiling with Kobe White.
Has Kobe White signed? Is he still out there?
There was a report, I think, on day 2 of free agency that said that he would like to go to the Lakers. And the fact that the Lakers haven't thrown anything his way is a little bit like, maybe you should. I mean, Kobe White's had some issues with injuries that have obviously dampened his prospects since coming in as a supposed starting point guard. But no, he still hasn't re-signed with the Bulls yet or another team.
That's love, bro.
I'm happy to move on. You happy to move on?
Yeah.
So the Cleveland Cavaliers added Robin Lopez, Raul Neto, and Ricky Rubio, and drafted Ochai Agbaji at the 14th pick, and re-signed Darius Garland to 5 for $193. Obviously, if he hits All NBA and whatever the other accolades are, MVP or defensive, he can get up to $231 million. I've given them a C- here. And a little bit similar to your points when it comes to the Atlanta Hawks. Like this team. Also, one thing I forgot to mention is that Sexton's still up in the air, so we still have a little bit of a question mark there in terms of Sexton. Is that what you're going to say?
My guy.
I've given them a C- because it's like they had an issue on the wing. They've got a plethora of small guards that can only play the point guard, and a plethora of big dudes who should probably just play the 5. But look, we'll play them at the 4 because we have to. Just this massive gap in between those two ends of the positional spectrum. Someone should let them know that these things exist. And Isaac Okoro is not one. And they didn't make any steps towards doing it whatsoever. Like, look, their free agency acquisitions of Raul Neto, Ricky Rubio, and Robin Lopez. Like, I get they've got a Rubio fetish. He did just tear his ACL. That's the reason why he traded him in the first place. But I don't know, culture. Obviously, he helped Darius Garland become an all-star last year. That was my thing last year. But that you don't need to add any depth there. Maybe if you have to get Ricky Rubio, do it. But just focus every living asset you have on upgrading your weakest position, which could be one of the weakest, depth rotations in the whole entire league right there. So a little bit annoyed at that, but I always get annoyed with the Cavs when they ruin my friend Darius's career. What do you reckon?
See, I disagree with you quite a lot. I've given them a B, and I think that in bringing in Rubio, who was really good for them before he tore his ACL, was like 6th man of the year good for them before he tore his ACL. Bringing in Rubio and Neto is a good piece of business, because the reason why this team faltered to the finish line last year wasn't because they didn't have wing depth. It's because they didn't have anyone who knew how to bounce a basketball. Darius Garland got injured and then had to play 45 minutes a game through the injury, literally because they didn't have it. They traded for fucking Rondo just so they could get someone on the roster who knew how to bounce a basketball.
They also traded for Karis LeVert, who wasn't very good at bouncing basketballs.
Yeah, well, we know that. Thanks. We know that. This is a bad confluence of my...
your guys on the one team.
Yeah, my guys with Sexton and LeVert on the same team. Like, fuck me.
I mean, the idea behind you liking them is that they're surrounded by guys that complement them, not guys that shouldn't be on the same roster.
Yeah, truly. I think that at the very least that Rubio and Neto guarantee that what happened last year won't happen again. And that the logic behind that is pretty sound, because this would have been a playoff team. They would have been the 6th seed if they didn't just falter massively through the last month and a half of the season. So you reinforce the one issue that really plagued you last season and then roll in with bringing back Sexton and a healthy squad. Like, that to me makes sense. And then throw in the guy Ochai Agbaji, who one of his draft comps is Derek White, who was the exact guy who I suggested that they trade for. at last season's trade deadline because he's kind of like Isaac Okoro if he was fucking okay at basketball. Isaac Okoro if he could bounce a ball and hit a three. So I kind of like that. He's 22 years old. He was a senior from Kansas. So in theory, he's someone who could come in and give you 15 minutes a night on the wing at a position where, as you said, they kind of don't really have much. And then also they drafted Luke Travers from the Perth Wildcats, 56th overall, and he's a 6'8" guard with a mullet, and he's Australian. So like, I'm fucking rooting for him.
Luke Travers looks good. You know how Chet Holmgren broke the Summer League blocks record with 6 the other day?
Yeah.
A day after that record was broken, Luke Travers broke the old record with 5 blocks. So, you know, imagine everywhere we would be seeing that on ESPN, AU, and Z. But
always the bridesmaid, never the bride, Luke Travers.
Also, they drafted Isaiah Mobley with the 49th pick. He is the brother of Kevin Mobley. Who's Evan. So I'm just going to go out on a limb.
Kevin.
That was my name in the group chat. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that he's probably going to get a roster spot for reasons outside of basketball. And hey, you're just going to be playing with 14 dudes instead of 15, just like Vlad Kankar and Nikola Jokic.
It's the old Zoran Dragic. And, who was J.R. Smith's brother's name? Chris Smith.
And it's the Zoran tax. You got to pay it. They're good players. All right, the next team are the Detroit Pistons, who traded away Jeremy Grant. They added Alec Burks, Nerlens Noel, Kemba Walker, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that dude. And they re-signed Marvin Bagley for 3 years, $37 million. Or if you're Dante and you woke up late and quickly scrolled through the chats on July 1st, what? They paid Bagley 3 for 73. That's fucked. And then we all just said no.
I was at work and I had a fucking conniption. I was like, this is a piss take.
It still is a piss take. More than $10 million for fucking a cunt called Marvin. Again, I really shouldn't say the C word on a podcast.
Marvin Williams III doesn't want to hear you say that.
So I've given them an A. Everything they've done here is great. They picked up 2 dead set rotation players in Alec Burks and Nerlens Noel, who will either just clog up the rotation with the team that's trying to develop them, and maybe they'll win a few more games than they want to, or they can just turn around and trade these guys for value at the deadline, in my opinion. And obviously just building on that young core, getting Jaden Ivey, who fell to the laps, but just capitalizing on a bad team, making a bad decision and drafting Jalen Duren with the 13th pick. The only reason it's not an A+ is because the Marvin Bagley money is so much. I don't know why you had to go 3 years on this. Surely just give him a lump sum for 1 year. No one's going to... Who are you outbidding here? But whatever. What have you given them here, Dante?
I've given them a B. I love the Ivy and the Jalen Duren moves. Like, that's exciting. That's needs filled. That's the potential outline of the next great Pistons team coming into view. But I mean, they didn't really get much for Jeremy Grant in the end. And I think looking at the situation overall, they've mismanaged this. Troy Weaver has mismanaged the asset because he could have got more had he done it at any point earlier in the previous 12 months, or at the deadline. He could have definitely got more than some cap flexibility and a bad first. The Bagley thing, like, you just give Marvin Bagley 1 year 10 and you say, okay, prove that you can put up good stats and, you know, impact winning on a bad team, and then we'll go from there. And whilst I kind of agree, I really agree with the principles behind them facilitating New York's salary dumping Burks and Noel. I don't love the players because Burks is not really a great shooter. He's not the kind of wing that you really want around Ivy and Cade. He's actually the exact opposite kind of wing that you want. And Nerlens Noel is just going to be a competition for Duren and Isaiah Stewart, which you don't really want or need at this point. So,
but for half a year, it doesn't matter.
Well, they're just kind of redundant on this team, both of them. And I think Burks will definitely get a first at some point during the season. Like a protected first for Burke sounds like fair value, but Noel, I'm less certain because he's getting paid close to 10 million a year and he's injury prone. So he's just going to sit on the roster and play if he stays healthy, which is not great for your 2 recent first round pick centers. So I'm quibbling here. I really like the big picture stuff that they did. The micro stuff, like I've got a little bit less, less optimism about maximizing the direction that they've taken. But I think that the direction that they've taken is regardless a strong one. So I've gone B, but I am being a bit picky here.
Cool. The Indiana Pacers are next, and while they haven't signed anyone, they have enough cap space to offer a max free agent contract to one DeAndre Ayton if he wants to sign it. They traded away Malcolm Brogdon. They lost Ricky Rubio and TJ Warren to free agency, and they drafted Benny Matt, already an infinitely better nicknameable guy than anyone on their roster last year. Benny Matt, 6 overall, and Andrew Nembhard.
Is that a good nickname? It kind of sounds like a shit nickname.
Oh, okay. Benedict. I was
Did you
actually
come
going to
up
call
with
him
that
Benjamin.
one?
Yeah, I did.
Or did you get that from the Bluebird?
No, I came up with that. So I guess I'll be quiet. Benedict Mathurin with the 6th overall pick. Andrew Nembhard, 31st. And they re-signed for Jalen Smith for 2 years. The details aren't out yet, or maybe they are, but whatever it is, it can't be more than the team option that your Phoenix Suns declined. But neither here nor there. I've given them C- just because they could have got more for Brogdon, and they literally haven't done anything else apart from the Brogdon trade, which, the Brogdon trade had to happen. They at least got a first-round pick for him. They got a couple of guys who, if you can take a look at Neesmith, you can take a look at Nick Stauskas. He had a couple of 50 burgers in the G League. There's tiny glimmers of hope that, if you squint hard enough, they'll probably disappear. But C-, what have you given them?
I'm giving them a D.
It's gone harder than me.
Yeah, I'm really unimpressed with this. Our boy Benny Matt. Let's wait and see. He looks great in summer league. They've got him there on the wing. And we talked about, you mentioned it just now. But we talked about what they got back from the Celtics for Brogdon. Not anything at all, really. Why did they have to trade Brogdon right now? Could you not have traded him in season or close to the start of the season for more?
I think the idea is doing right by the player. I think I remember seeing that somewhere. It was like, we want him to go to a situation where he wants to go. And again, just like, making agents feel a little bit happy, which there is value in that. But I think the value in that is kind of underweighed by the 2023 first round pick from the Boston Celtics.
From the NBA finalists.
Who are probably going to be the 1 seed again.
Wait, is this the same Celtics that have made the Final Four of the NBA for 4 of the last 6 years?
And have consistently good regular seasons, which is what the picks are based off. Yeah, that's them. Yeah. The green ones.
Yeah, just checking. Well, I mean, obviously, if you want to deliberately hamstring yourself by doing right by the player or doing a favor to an agent, that drastically changes the calculus. But they obviously could have gotten more for Brogdon now, or if they waited and let the point guard landscape kind of settle a little bit before figuring out who might need a ready-made plug-and-play point guard at some point during the season, because that literally always happens. He would have been eminently movable in season if they had decided. And it's not really clear what the plan is here. Like,
are you be bad, draft good guy next year, Scoot Henderson, Victor Wembanyama.
Yeah, but they're not going to be actually that bad next year. They'll probably be fine. Like, not fine as in, I'm not saying that they'll be the 9 or the 10 seed, but like, they're not going to win less than 30 games. Like, they'll probably win in the mid-30s and get another 6 to 8 pick. Like, if you're going to tear down. They kind of aren't really going the whole way towards that. They're just kind of like skirting the middle path. And I'm unimpressed from an asset management standpoint and from an overall direction standpoint. So I've given them my second lowest grade of anyone in the Wrighton Conference, which is D.
Moving on to the Miami Heat, they drafted Nikola Jovic with the 27th overall pick, who looks very good in Summer League. They re-signed Caleb Martin to a 3 for 20 deal. The final year's player option, and he also gets 15% trade kicker. They added all the bells and whistles to this contract because this was the most they could offer him, and he wanted to stay in Miami, so he just asked for everything. Victor Oladipo, 1 for 11 mil, and Dwayne Dedmon, 2 for 9. And they lost PJ Tucker in kind of a weird situation. Obviously, there was the whole thing with Jimmy Butler, yelling some expletives to him as he was walking out the door, but it just didn't seem like he wanted to go, but I guess he did, and that's why it's called free agency, so you can be a free agent. I've given them a C+ here, just because keeping Victor Oladipo, who was a serious playoff contributor, which I didn't think he would be, but being able to keep that guy where you brought him in as a buy low and he hit one of his high watermarks and you're able to maintain that asset, I think that's great. We got into a debate last year, Dante, talking about losing PJ Tucker for the Milwaukee Bucks. I feel fairly confident that I have won that debate. A year from now, he was playing solid minutes in the Eastern Conference Finals, just as he would have done for the Milwaukee Bucks had they shelved out and re-signed him. But I'm not going to do that for a second year. The dude is like 50 years old. Like at some point, it can't be that bad that this old dude's walking again. I'll just take my victory and leave it there. And yeah,
I'm gonna jump in on that.
I'm the host. I'm going to mute you. No, what is it?
In a classic case of Carol retroactive engineering here of the conversation. I wasn't saying that I don't think PJ Tucker's good. Saying that Milwaukee made the right decision in letting him walk. And considering that Milwaukee would have probably made the conference finals at least last year if Chris Middleton was healthy, I think that actually I have won that argument because they let the guy walk. They didn't pay him. They paid other people. And then bar injury, their performance was at the level that I anticipated of them. So I'll just leave that there and take my victory lap.
No worries. All right. Well, we'll both be walking around our room soon. I've given them a C+. What have you given them?
I'm walking around my room all day at the moment. So I'm already here.
What's your grade, bro?
C. Yeah, I mean, bringing back Caleb Martin, he's turned into a good contributor for them, and bringing back Oladipo, you're right. Like we've been saying this the last 2 seasons, but he has now shown, the maybe a bit of realized potential that if he could just get healthy, he can be a really great contributor again. And he's not actually that old. So I really like that, bringing him back on a 1-year deal. And I wouldn't have paid what they paid for PJ Tucker. I just can't fathom not only giving PJ Tucker 11 mil a year, but giving him a 3-year deal. He's going to be 40 years old. And his value to Miami and to Philadelphia, where he has signed with his old pal Daryl Morey, his value is ostensibly to be the number one defender of the best wing assignment. And it's I'm not letting a 38-year-old person do that for me and expecting it to go particularly well, because generally that's not how that works. So I'm extremely skeptical that this will turn out to be a good long-term, over the duration of the contract deal. And I'm giving the Heat a bump for basically just saying, okay, cool, you can go. We'll find another wing from somewhere who can do most of what you do. And considering that it's the fucking Miami Heat, if there's one thing that you can bank on, is that they will find another wing from somewhere who can do whatever they need to do.
All right, let's move on to the Milwaukee Bucks before we go to break. They added Joe Ingles with the taxpayer mid-level exception. They drafted Marjon Beauchamp with the 24th overall pick. How's the fucking pronunciation there? They re-signed Pat Cotton on 3 for 30. How's the pronunciation there? Serge Ibaka at the minimum. Bobby Porter's 4 for 50, let's say. Javon Carter and Wesley Matthews both coming back on minimums. I've given them a B+ here because obviously being one of these teams that are right against the hard cap, nothing you can do really apart from just use that mid-level exception, draft your dude. see what you can do with the minimums and re-sign your guys. That's exactly what they did. And you talk about wanting to use your taxpayer mid-level exception on a guy who's going to actually contribute when it matters and actually play in the playoffs. Joe Ingles, if he is healthy after his torn ACL, he, as we know, is one of the best defenders and distributors in the playoffs. And he might not be there, but it's worth the risk for the guys that were in this conversation who they were looking to re-sign. The reason I haven't given them an A or an A+ is because I just don't love the money for Bobby Portis. I think that's too much, and I think put in a little bit too much emotion with that re-signing. Obviously, he's fan favorite, and he's got big eyeballs, and he wears a headband and etc. But I've said it before, and I'm going to keep saying it. I just don't think Bobby Portis is that good, and I think this is a little bit too much money. Well, what have you done here?
So I've gone an A. I agree with you that I think it's a bit too much money for Bobby Portis, but at the same time, I think he'll be a movable contract if they ever decide that they want to move on. Like they shouldn't have to attach anything to get off of him. And despite it being too much money for them, he has been an important contributor in their last 2 playoff runs. So they at least know that they're getting that as kind of like a basement of performance, despite the dollar value, the sticker value. I like the idea of getting Ingles in and seeing what, if anything, he can give you post ACL. That's a completely high reward, no risk move. And adding a couple of guys that were good for them over the last few seasons that can fill a role for them, and then adding Beauchamp as well. I think they've given them enough. They've given themselves enough of an opportunity to kind of pull themselves clear of the best of the rest in the East, where I don't think Miami did that. I think Miami kind of struggled a bit with inertia. I think the Bucks have given themselves a really good chance to be markedly better and have a better postseason opportunity than they did last season, especially because, as I mentioned before, it really just depends on health with this team. If Chris Middleton was healthy last season, we could have been talking about a completely different finals matchup. So yeah, I've given them an A, because even though they have only done things around the margin, they've kind of essentially they've done good things around the margin.
Definitely. All right, well, let's take a quick break, and I'll talk to you in a minute. So the New York Knicks, the biggest team of this offseason, throwing a lot of cash at obviously Jalen Brunson, Isaiah Hartenstein, drafting Trevor Keels. I know that was on your bingo board. Re-signing Mitchell Robinson,
42nd overall.
Re-signing Mitchell Robinson to 4 for $60. What's the opposite of a steal? A putback. And Jericho Sims at 3 for, I imagine, something just a little bit above the minimum. They lost Alec Burks, Nerlens Noel, and Kemba Walker. I've given them a C+. In terms of progressing towards an NBA championship, I think this is a clear step as opposed to just treading water. But Brunson might be immediately untradeable on that deal. Hartenstein, I've written down here just to try and, just try and see what you would say. But I think he's got a little bit of Rudy Gobert in him. Extremely sexy advanced stats dude. And he's actually got a really good little push shot. He's got that little Rashawn Holmes floater package from just inside the free throw line. So I think that's a good pickup, but then they doubled down on getting a really good analytical center by re-signing Mitchell Robinson, who's not a really good analytical center, to 4 for $60, which is just way too much money. Good money if you can get it, especially if you were making less than $1 million for the past 3 years. But good coin. Obviously, this is a little bit TBD because their name is all over the Donovan Mitchell trade rumors at the moment. So still have to see what's going to happen there. I think that would definitely push my grade up. But as it stands currently, I've given them a C+. What have you done, Dante?
Well, you wanted to know what I think about your little comment in the doc about Gobert and Hartenstein.
The German baguette.
The bratwurst, surely.
Fuck, what a missed opportunity.
But you will know, but the listeners may not, that when I'm editing some of your stuff that goes up on the deep2.com, can't believe it's that simple, and on Nuglove, if you've made a little funny, I'll highlight it and leave a little comment appreciating it. And I almost verbally abused you in the doc in a highlighted comment a little bit where you made that joke.
I knew it would.
But it is. But in all seriousness, though, what did they sign Hartenstein for? Like, not heaps. Like a 2 year.
I think it was
2 years. Like,
under the MLA. I think it was like 7.5
2
maybe.
years. Yeah, like that's not bad. Like 2 years, and under the MLE for a guy who was maybe the best backup center in the league last year.
Can I just say I don't know why I'm guessing. I've got literally a spreadsheet open here with his money. He's getting 7.8 this year and 8.2 next year.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I don't mind that. The Brunson deal is fine. I think, like you said, it pushes him closer to title contention now, and more importantly, it means that Derrick Rose doesn't have to be the starting
35 minutes
in 2022.
Can I just push back on that and say that the head coach is still Tom Thibodeau, and he might just start Derrick Rose over Jalen Brunson?
He very well might. The Robinson deal is just indefensible. Like, that's fucked that you're giving Mitchell Robinson $15 million a year over 4 years. What the actual fuck? And I hate that I'm about to say this though. The NBA fan in me, and I hope you know what I mean by that. Just like the regular NBA fan, dare I say the American NBA fan, the glitz and the glamour of the NBA star power. I would actually love Donovan Mitchell in New York. Like, I don't necessarily think it would go super well, but it would just be cool. He seems like a New York kind of guy. They seem like a Donovan Mitchell kind of team. It would just kind of be fun to see what happens and to have like another moment having like a genuine like all-star, all-NBA ceiling player. Yeah, because obviously like in the moment it was sick, but looking back, the Julius Randle season 2020, 2021 seems like a fever dream. And then before that, it was Melo all the way back in, fucking 10 years ago. Since they've had like a kind of like a bit of star power. So I think it would be cool. I don't think it would be good necessarily, but it would definitely be cool.
It'll be better. It'll be better than the last team, because obviously that Julius Randle team is more of a Tom Thibodeau team. Where it was like, okay, they're winning because they've got an above-average defense and they're struggling on offense. And it's like Julius Randle is doing everything he can, but he's just clearly not like a go-to guy on a very good team. So it would be interesting to see him just go in the complete opposite side of that spectrum, where it's like, okay, Jalen Brunson and Donovan Mitchell are undersized, and they're not very good defenders, and they've never had to be good defenders in their whole entire lives. Now they're in a backcourt with Rowan fucking Barrett, Julius Randle at the bigs, and like, yeah, Isaiah Hartenstein might be, the French Rutwurst, right? I'll keep intentionally fucking it up. He might be like an analytical darling, but holy fuck, man, you're gonna need a lot to make up for undersized guards as you guards.
I feel like every time if this happens, every time Brunson and Mitchell have a defensive possession together, it'll be like, yep, I'm a 6'2" guard, and my backcourt partner is a 6'2" guard. Neither of us are very good at defense. You might be wondering, how did I get here? Record scratch. Because
also you got to throw Trevor Keels into that equation as well. Like, he's no defensive stopper himself. Steal, of course, but you just see
Mitchell last season, and particularly in the playoffs, was just vile. His D, like, he was from the Trae Young school of. And I'm gonna have another go at the entitled millennials, me the boomer, but it came from a place of entitlement. Like, I'm so good offensively, I'm the guy, I'm an all-star, I don't have to play D. The other guys can do that. And I just fucking hate that attitude, because like Donovan Mitchell is athletically in the 90th percentile and above of players at his position, and he's like 6'4", so he's not small. If you tried an adequate amount, he could be better. He could be a good defender. So the fact that he has been so diabolically bad for large stretches of his career, even as his team is playing high stakes, high leverage basketball, it's really vexing, and it makes me mad.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Anyway, I had to get that off my chest. Anyway, get this guy to New York City. Get this guy to the Big Apple. Before we move to the next team, just quickly though, because we're batting around trade possibilities in the GC before. Do you think that this trade can possibly get done without Barrett going the other way? Because
I think so.
What does that look like?
Salary, Emmanuel Quickly, and more picks than Rudy Gobert got, like 4 or 5, and like you
literally can't do more picks than what Rudy Gobert got. You actually physically can't.
No, they
trade
can.
more.
No, they can trade 7 first-round picks in one deal, because they own Charlotte and whatever they got from Detroit. They got the Milwaukee pick as well.
Yeah,
you can't on 2K, but you can in real life. Like they're able to.
So they have to be trading other people's picks, other teams'
as well
picks.
as their own. Yeah. So they can give up, just to beat the Rudy Gobert thing, they can give up 5 first-round picks alongside Emmanuel Quickly and Evan Fournier.
And swaps.
Yeah. Which is a lot for a dude who isn't a top 10 player in the league.
Well, there's an argument he's not a top 20 player in the league.
Yeah, I'm being
but
nice.
I kind of like that though. I mean, like if you like Utah could definitely get a better deal elsewhere. IMO.
Just a more high end talent than Emmanuel.
Would
Quickly.
you do it if you were? Would you do it if you were New York and Utah said we're not doing it unless you put Barrett in?
What? So Barrett and 5 first-round picks. Yeah,
Barrett, Fournier, and however many picks, less picks than you'd have to give up if it was just Quickly.
I would, whether it be because I don't love Barrett, but just to get off that Evan Fournier deal, man. Like some of those picks are there as well. Just trying to move off the Frenchman. Don't Google him, by the way.
Yeah, don't. Yeah,
holy crap. Yeah, if you're trying to look up a trade, don't start the trade with Fournier deal. Worst trade of my life. So let's move on to the Orlando Magic. Sorry, just to recap there. Actually, let's just add a little bit to this because it's the Knicks. You've given them a C. I've given them a C+. If they do that RJ Barrett deal or even an Emmanuel Quickly deal, which for whoever it is, Donovan Mitchell, what would you give them in a grade for this offseason?
What have I given them? I given him a C. I'd probably give him a C+.
Yeah, right. I've given them a C+. I'll give them a B. All right. So the Orlando Magic. Drafted Paolo Banchero first overall, Caleb Houston 32nd. They re-signed Gary Harris at 2 for 26, Mo Bamba 2 for 21, and Bol 2 years at the assumed minimum. And they lost Robin Lopez, who signed to the Cavs. I've given them a B because I don't want to boost them too much for drafting the right guy, but I think they drafted the right guy. He looked great in summer league. If they can flip Gary Harris for value this season, I think that is excellent, and I think they're going to get boosted up from a B to an A. I just worry that they couldn't do that last off season because they wanted to do that, and I think they were getting offered was 2nd-round picks, and they said no. Again, Gary Harris, $26 million, good money if you can get it for just hanging out in Orlando with no expectations whatsoever. And yeah, Mo Bamba. I don't know who they're outbidding, giving him fucking $20 million in a row, but there was a song named after him when he got drafted, so maybe that's got something to do with it.
Yeah, disappointing. Mo Bamba, just him in general. I got nothing to say. I gave him a C+. The only thing I had to say is I spun out when I realized that Gary Harris is only 27 years old because. I was thinking like can they flip Gary Harris with value? Like he's pretty old. His body's kind of breaking down. Like does he have many good years left? And then I saw that he's only 27. And it's like holy shit. Crazier than that though is that in his 2nd season he averaged 19 points per game. How long ago does that feel?
He shot like 48% from 3 or something like absolutely fucked. He did an interview with he did an interview with Zach Lowe, and he goes like, "Hey, that's like awesome. Like, yeah, that's just absolutely incredible." There you go. He shot 47% from 3 in his 2nd year. And then he was like, "Oh, so what's it? That's pretty good." And then he's just like, "No, I want to shoot 50. I want to be the first guy to shoot 50% from 3." And since then, it's gone down. As low as 33. So yeah, I'm happy to move on if you want to move on.
Yeah. Let's leave the Magic in the dust.
The Philadelphia 76ers signed Daniel House, PJ Tucker, traded for D'Anthony Melton, and re-signed James Harden, who took less, but also is probably going to recoup the value the following season. They lost Danny Green, who has a torn ACL, and they lost DeAndre Jordan. I've given them an A because, just this team wasn't good enough. They needed extra pieces. Maybe they weren't good enough because of James Harden, but they've sort of walked themselves into this corner, so they have to double down, triple down. And I think surrounding James Harden and surrounding Joel Embiid with great 3-and-D role players like D'Anthony Melton, Daniel House, PJ Tucker, incredible. I haven't given them an A+ because they tried to trade Tobias Harris and they tried to trade Matisse Thybulle, and they still employ those two gentlemen. Would have been nice to see them get off the Tobias Harris deal and just do anything else with that money. But the D'Anthony Melton trade, which I think they traded the 23rd pick or the 20th pick in the draft, straight up for D'Anthony Melton with the Grizz. And Danny Green was in that deal. I think D'Anthony Melton is going to be playing closing minutes at every single Philadelphia 76ers playoff game, and he's going to look so good. And it's going to be embarrassing that the Grizzlies didn't give him a big enough chance. Like even after Ja fucking went down in that Golden State series, I was worried about D'Anthony Melton just absolutely clamping Steph Curry, and they just kept going with Tyus Jones and kept giving the ball to Kyle Anderson. So I really want to see what he does if he just gets given all this time to run alongside of James Harden and Joel Embiid pick and roll. What have you given them?
I've given them an A+, largely for the reasons that you have stated. I don't like the PJ Tucker deal for 3 years, but for this year, it's a good deal. Mm-hmm. And I think he will give them an added element in the postseason that they haven't had, i.e. toughness on the wing. Daniel House is a really good addition. And Melton, like it's such a good deal. It's such a good deal. The reason why the Grizzlies let him go, they essentially chose Tyus Jones, who they re-signed for, I think, 3 for 37. Henceforth known as the Bagley. They re-signed Tyus Jones to the Bagley because he's the more traditional, solid, stable, run the second unit point guard, whereas Melton is less of that. But going to a situation where you're playing with James Harden, you don't really need to be that. So I think that's a great trade. And Harden being back there for $32 million this year rather than $47 million this year, which allowed them to sign House and Tucker, is really good. And I was in the shower the other day, and I just was kind of thinking, like, what if James Harden gets good again? Like, what if it actually happens and James Harden is like 85 to 90% of peak James Harden? This team is going to be really fucking good if he is hitting his step back and getting to the rim. If those two things are recoverable skills for him, then this team is going to be so good. And I think that along with the Bucks and the Celtics, I think they're ensconced in the top 3 of the Wrighton Conference. So I've given them an A+. It's contingent on Harden kind of giving a good performance. But regardless, like, even if he's going to be bad, you'd rather him be bad on a $32 million contract and let you sign some role players than on a $47 million contract, and that's it.
Yeah, really not a fan of words that rhyme with nonce, but that's right. I'll let that one fly. Just before we move on here, I completely agree with why you've given them an A+, but would you, and I'm going to ask you this question here, would you give up Tyrese Maxey, Tobias Harris, and I think they can give up 3 to 4 first-round picks. They owe their 2025 pick to Oklahoma City, but it's protected top 6, and then obviously the deal that they just gave up in the James Harden deal, they owe their 23 pick to someone. But would you give up, heaps of picks, Tyrese Maxey, Tobias Harris for Kevin Durant?
Yeah.
And would the Brooklyn Nets say yes, you reckon?
Maybe.
Is that better than getting Mikhail back? Mikhail and 4 Suns picks? Would you rather get Tyrese Maxey?
They're not getting Mikhail back.
But, in terms of just getting the player, would you rather have Tyrese Maxey trying to keep you in the playoffs or Mikhail Bridges?
I would rather have, in a vacuum, I'd rather have Maxey, because I think Maxey has all-star upside. I think Maxey, if you told me that there were 2 years in the next 8 years where Maxey was the best player on a 6 seed, I wouldn't say you're insane. Whereas Bridges just doesn't have that kind of upside. But for a team with Ben Simmons, Maxey is not the sort of player who you love to pair with Ben Simmons, unless you and Ben Simmons are in agreement that he's a full-time 4, and he's doing what everyone has always wanted to see him do. But that seems unlikely. I've realized I haven't given you an answer. I probably would rather want Bridges than if I was the Nets. I'd probably rather want Bridges because I'm telling myself that. Well, him and Simmons on the wing, like, okay, let's match up with the Celtics on the wing there. But I'm telling myself that I'm a playoff team, and I need to get like playoff role players. That's not true that I'm a playoff team necessarily, but that's what I'm telling myself. So I probably would rather Bridges in that situation.
The next team up is the Toronto Raptors. They added Otto Porter Jr., whose wife is from Toronto. I feel like every single report had that for no good reason. DJ Wilson, they drafted Christian Koloko at the 33rd overall pick. Re-signed Thad Young at 2 for 16. Re-signed Chris Boucher, 3 for 35, which I know you were vexed by. But I've given them a C just because they've just ran the whole entire team back. They've added Otto Porter Jr., which is like, he might be the most vanilla taxpayer MLE signing anyone can make. He is, because of his injuries, he's capped at playing, 25 to 30 minutes a night. He's going to hit three. He's going to play D. He's not going to be better. He's not going to be worse than what he is. And like Chris Boucher, Chris Boucher, I think he's worth this 10 mil a year, but Nick Nurse doesn't play him. So it's like, are you playing him to give Nick Nurse a nudge to be like, look, fucking he's there, you may as well use him, or is he a trade chip? I don't know, but I've just given them a straight C. What have you done here?
I've written here C+, but I'm going C as well.
I've sworn.
Stop it. Thad Young, 2 for 16, whatever, you kind of had to re-sign him because you traded a first for him last season, strangely. The Boucher signing is one of the most puzzling because your first, not only is it 3 for 35, which is an overpay anyway you look at it. Like, I don't even know if he's necessarily worth the 10. Like,
yeah, that's fair.
I'd be looking at less than that. But it's puzzling because the first 2 reserves off the bench last season for this team were centers. It was Ken Birch and it was Thagic, who they were using as a small ball center. They have not 1, not 2, not 3, but 3 big wings who can all theoretically be used as small ball 5s. So why you're shelling out money for someone who you already had and didn't use, even though you have myriad other options for other looks at his position, why you're shelling that money out, I just fully don't know, particularly when the only reserve guard they have is Malachi Flynn. If either Gary Trent or Fred VanVleet goes down, this team's fucked. Like, fully fucked. They're going to be the Cavs of last season. And not even bringing in like a Raul Neto, someone who can bounce the basketball in the absence of one of your guards for 10 games. Like, it's super strange that wasn't even viewed as a priority. I mean, what, like, is Siakam the backup point guard? Like,
yeah, Scotty Barnes, but it's always sort of a spot fix right there. You do need a point guard sized person to at least play the position.
Yeah, fully. And, not to belabor the point, but Malachi Flynn hasn't been particularly good either. So
I think there's something there. I don't know.
You think he's a backup point guard? You think he's like, you reckon that's the backup problem solved?
Oh, well, I just looked at what number his percentages start with. I'm not going to.
What do they start with?
3.
I'm not going small guards that can't start it with a 4. Personally, that's my favorite brand of small guard.
I'm not going to time a boat to him. Keep going.
No, it's just strange. It's just a
Yeah.
really weird partitioning of resources.
Like bringing in OPJ, it's like, okay, well, now you've got heaps of wings, but maybe there's a trade in the
Yeah.
making. But then is the trade Kevin Durant? That doesn't address your guard issue. Is the trade Donovan Mitchell? Well, we haven't heard anything about that at all. It's like you're getting ready to slot in OPJ for one of these guys that's going to go missing, but none of the guys that their hat has been on the ring, like whether it's a Miles Turner or DeAndre Ayton potentially, they're still not a point guard.
Yeah, but I mean, even aside from looking at it as a future play, like you're paying OPJ $6.5 million for 2 years, you're paying Boucher for 3 years, and you're paying him almost double what OPJ is getting. Like at a position that, again, not only do you have depth there that's better than him, but you were using that depth more than you were using Boucher last year anyway. And it's a position where you're completely, like paying $12 million for your third or fourth look at center is just completely indefensible. Whereas Porter, like, yeah, you got heaps of wings, but you can never have too many wings. And $6.5 million for a good wing who can defend and shoot is completely fine. It just is, particularly when there's like a dearth of smaller guys who can create. Fred VanVleet being the only guy on the roster, aside from Trent, who's really more of a straight line driver, who can actually kind of create out of a pick and roll really, really, really well. Like, fuck, it just seems so strange. Like, if you were going to spend 12 mil on a free agent, it's Tyus Jones, same contract as same contract as Boucher, flip it around, and then we're talking completely different. But it's just strange. And unless they do a major rejig via a trade and shuffle the cards a little bit, they're going to be lopsided again. And I understand that, like, Siakam and Barnes are going to have a heavier ball handling presence than wings on other teams. Like, I get that, but like you said before, you still do need point guards on the team. You can't just completely say that it's not important.
Yeah. All right. So the final team of the night are the Washington Wizards. They added DeLon Wright in free agency. They traded for Monty Morris and Will Barton, drafted Johnny Davis with the 10th overall pick. Re-signed Bradley Beal. I don't know if it was notable enough, but they re-signed Bradley Beal to a 5-for $251 million deal. That deal, as we spoke about last week, has a no trade clause in it. It also has a 15% trade bonus in there, which is, again, good money if you can get it. Lost Thomas Bryant, KCP, Raul Neto, and Ish Smith. If Toronto's wondering where those just backup point guards, career backups have gone, they used to all be in Washington. They're all just hanging out in the four-man point guard depth chart. They actually still are. They just subbed them out for DeLon Wright and Monty Morris. But I've given them a D- here. Obviously, even before looking at all the ancillary moves, just Bradley Beal bent them over a barrel and showed them the 50 states. Getting the no trade thing is just unbelievable. We spoke about it at length last week. We had about half an hour of content on it, just talking about how incredibly fucked the Wizards are. They were already going to be fucked if they gave them all this money, but then they added that no trade clause in there. I don't like Will Barton. Especially next to Bradley Beal.
You're kind of free now because you don't have to convince yourself anymore. You can just have your own opinion on Will Barton without having any skin in the game.
I know the joke you're getting out there, and I won't let it happen.
No, I actually, you misjudged me. I wasn't actually making a joke.
It's been a bad day for me guessing your takes.
Yeah, I'm thinking more just from your general affinity for the Nuggets, and the fact that you write for a Nuggets website.
I have never liked Will Barton, really. Like, I like him. I've already done it, haven't I? I've done the exact same thing you said. I just don't have to do anymore. But I liked him in terms of being in Denver for the whole entire time, and like he puts up
Will
shots.
Barton has you Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, literally. That's the best way to put it. Let's just leave it at that. He's wing sized, but you don't look at him as a wing. Just look at him as a point guard who takes shots for you.
Yeah, that's sick and doesn't create for others.
Yeah, and oh man, just that shot when Denver could have won a game against could have won that game against Golden State. Nikola Jokic was cooking. Obviously, he's got a great matchup against anyone in the whole entire world, like especially Kevon Looney or someone. And Will Barton took a shot from the logo, a three from the logo when they were down by two or whatever it was, and then just gave away the slim chance they had at just recouping some fucking value in that series. No more. What have you given
No more. I've given them an F, Shawnee. For a few reasons. One, the we talked about the Beal trade last season, and I was actually listening to friend of the program, Danny LaRue, his podcast. He did a podcast with Jared Dubin. Also, fuck me, Danny LaRue loves a betting ad. Oh my god, mate!
He was over the moon.
This guy is bankrolled by the bookies. He's the spiritual antagonist to the deep two values. But Jared Dubin was kind of railing against the perception that there needs to be that the Beal no trade clause is like historically significant, because he said that there are actually only there are very strict conditions in which you can actually get a no trade clause. You can't do it on an extension. You have to have had a minimum amount of years service, etc. You have to actually make it to free agency, so that there were only 3 players in the last 2 or 3 years who were actually eligible for a no trade clause, which means it's not like, oh my God, this player didn't get it and this player didn't get it. Like LeBron never had one. It's not like that. And I would say, okay, fine. They still didn't have to give it to him. Also, the other 3 guys who were eligible for it are far better than him anyway, and they didn't get it. It was not even fucking mentioned. They've given it to him regardless. And, you want to hear us rant about it a little bit, go back to last week's episode. But the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm like, what was the point of the last 2 years? Because they've locked themselves into this team. They have no cap flexibility. Could we not have saved ourselves 2 years of hustle if they wanted to lock themselves into the treadmill of mediocrity? We could have just opted out of this Beal melodrama that is going to end with him getting the bag and forcing his way out anyway. We could have just said, maybe let's not do this. Let's just treat this situation as it is. We're obviously not going to compete for anything serious. Let's just be the 7-8 seed and see what happens. I feel like I've been taken for a ride. But just to kind of close out, in another edition of Evan Fournier, Don't Google It, don't Google the Washington Wizards cap situation going forward, because it's really fucked. Next season, the 23-24 season, Beal is at $47 million. Porzingis has a player option for $36 million. And there are 2 things that can happen with that. Either it goes really well and he opts out of that and re-signs for a higher figure. So you're paying Beal and Porzingis closer to $90 million per year. Or it goes really badly this season and he opts in, and so you're paying them $80 million for him to be shit. Now, you're already at between $80 and $90 million next season for those 2 players. Kyle Kuzma, who had a case to be one of the best reserves in the league last season, has a $13 million player option that he will definitely opt out of and will probably re-sign for something closer in the range of 20. So between those 3 players, you're sitting at $100 million. And that's not factoring in extensions for Rui Hachimura or Denny Avdia or literally anything else. Literally any other thing that you might like to do. So is a team next season of Beal, Porzingis, Kuzma, Rui, Denny, with Monty Morris and Daniel Gafford making around $10 million each? Is that team, what's that team doing? Give me a number.
It's a double digit.
Yeah, it's a double digit, right? So
it's in the plane.
Why have I been invested in this for 2 years?
Man. I'm speechless. Like, let's just move on. Do you want to quickly squeeze in a joke about Anthony Gill, who was re-signed for the minimum?
I'll tell you what, that bloke, even though he had a couple of down years in the EuroLeague, he can really stroke it. He can really stroke it. And what's more, he's not afraid to stroke it. You know, if he gets the opportunity to get
Sounds
out
like
there,
my first wife.
if he gets the opportunity to get out there and get his hands on it, he is going to stroke it. And you know what? That's all you can ask for in a reserve. So I think big signing for them bringing Mr. Gill back.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dante, that is the Eastern Conference. Did you have
will I
something
see
to
you-
add?
Will I see you next week for the Lefton conference, Sean?
Yeah, definitely. See you there. That's it. That's if I don't have COVID by then. But yeah, man, COVID.
Are you
pod.
expecting it?
Well, actually, at halftime, I got some news. So it's not off the cards.
Wow. Well, you hit that fantastically well. I wouldn't have guessed that you'd gotten some news at halftime.
Well, the news is that I'll be playing Civ 6 for the next 7 days if the worst case scenario hits. So it's not going to disrupt my podcasting.
Well, we can commiserate whilst I play FM.
The forever professional we are.
All right. Well, pray that you don't have COVID, and I'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. Speak to you then. We were over the moon when we first heard that the NBA was going to be televised on Australian free-to-air TV in the 2019-20 season. It didn't exactly go swimmingly, with the nasty cough halting the season and games getting cancelled left, right and centre, but it was a huge step and an exciting one for basketball fans all across the country.
Better yet, it wasn't a commercial channel cashing in on some basketball nerds like us. It was SBS, one of our public broadcasters. Unfortunately, the NBA wasn't the only thing SBS was pushing last season. They also ran advertisements from Sportsbet, Ladbrokes, Bet365, BetEasy, and Neds, some of the biggest sports betting companies in Australia.
In a one step forwards, two steps backwards move, SBS has dropped the ball here. As a public broadcaster, SBS plays a key role in providing relevant, culturally appropriate health information to local communities. The last thing SBS should be doing is offering a platform for gambling companies during the most financially unstable time in recent memory.
This past year, men aged 18 to 24 made up 79% of new gambling account holders, with increased median spending and frequency of bets. This is the last thing we should be spending our money on given the financial uncertainty that comes with the pandemic. During COVID lockdowns, wagering companies spent more money on advertising and incentives to gamble, and it worked. SBS needs to hear from viewers that gambling ad revenue isn't worth the harm it causes. Call on the SBS chair, George Savitas, to put community health ahead of gambling revenue by signing the petition at www.endgamblingads.org.au/get gambling off SBS with hyphens in between.